Which law has given Tinubu the rights to appoint a friend of his, or a stooge of his, or a loyalist of his, and overthrow the elected representative of Rivers people and use such people to govern Rivers State? So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and Nigerians must rise against this. The president of South Korea, like I said, was removed and is facing trial for declaring a martial law upon the country. So Tinubu ought to be removed and ought to be facing trial for treason. This is the treason we're talking about, not arresting children who do not know anything about removing a government and saying you want to try them for treason. This is the actual treason, and this is what should happen. Elected people should be very careful what they do. Your power is not forever. One day they will account for all the things they are doing. So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and should be regarded as that. It's not a declaration of state of emergency. It's a declaration of martial law, whereby you remove elected representatives by force of arms, and then you install a leader, which is a sole administrator outside the democratic norms.
All right. So here we have another problem. You know, some people know that there is a problem in Nigeria, but the question is who will solve it? And so for some people, all they do is to come on radio, is to go on television and tell you, oh, this one is wrong, oh, this one is not good. But the problem or the question is, who is going to solve it? Now, I have taken time to listen to some of the lawyers and some of the high-ranked personnel that talk about this suspension or the suspending of the governor of Rivers State. And some of them made it crystal clear that the president does not have any constitutional right to suspend an elected governor.
No law has empowered the president to remove a governor. In other words, you might also say that if the country is fighting a war, there's no provision of the Nigerian constitution that allows the president or anybody for that matter to remove an elected official. Between 1979 and now, we have close to 20 cases of our courts, which have upheld the right of Nigerian people to be governed properly in accordance with the law. In other words, the law is saying that it is illegal on the part of state governors to remove elected chairmen and councillors and replace them with caretaker committees. Under the Constitution, you can only remove a governor by impeachment, by resignation, or on account of ill health. In the case of a legislator, you can only remove him or her by the process of recall.
They said it. And then I was waiting for, the National Assembly. I was waiting for probably the senators, the National Assembly to do something over it. To my greatest surprise, I saw a video today from the National Assembly. Waiting these people do there. Waiting these people do, I don't understand.
Any more contributions? Any more contributions? So we put the question. Are we ready for the question? Are we ready? Those in support of this request of Mr. President as amended should say aye. Aye! Those in support of this request from Mr. President as amended should say aye. Aye! Those against should say nay. There is have it. Thank you very much. Clerk?
I no understand. And then I begin to wonder, is it that there is no law that these people don't know the Nigerian constitution, they don't know the Nigerian rules and regulations, they don't know Nigerian, is it that they don't know the constitution anymore? Hi, Jesus. Where somebody will default the constitution and everything goes on fine. Everything goes on as if nothing happened. So Nigeria no longer use her constitution to, keep things in order. Hey. I don't know what to say, honestly speaking. Honestly speaking, this is Anyway, please let me not talk too much.
People have been making a mistake as to what the president did in Rivers State. With profound respect to everybody that has been talking, the president did not declare state of emergency in Rivers State. The president declared a martial law in Rivers State. And I want you to understand the difference. The state of emergency is recognized by our constitution and has given the president the power to declare state of emergency under certain conditions. The Nigerian Bar Association, led by its president, has made it clear that none of those conditions has been fulfilled to warrant the declaration of state of emergency, meaning that the purported declaration is not a state of emergency. The Supreme Court is very clear. In the case of Attorney General of Bendel State and Adeyo, he said any act of governance not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. So there is nothing like state of emergency in what President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did. Why? Because state of emergency does not, even if the situation has arisen, does not include the removal of elected representatives of the people. The Constitution is very clear in section 1 subsection 2 that Nigeria shall not be governed or any part thereof by any persons except in accordance with the Constitution. Where is it in the Constitution where it was stated that Nigeria or any state should be governed by a sole administrator? None. So what the president did is akin to what the president of South Korea did when he declared martial law and wanted to remove the elected representatives of the people. The legislature moved in immediately, including the members of the party of the president, and removed the president himself for declaring martial law and intending to remove elected representatives of the people. That is a coup against the federation. The president of South Korea is awaiting trial for doing that, even his own party. So what the legislature is expected to be thinking about doing is removing Tinubu for declaring a martial law on a state, a federating unit, and trying to rule that state through the military, through sole administrator, not contemplated by our constitution. So what Tinubu has done, can't you see? And let me explain the more. He usurped even the power to make law for that state. He said the sole administrator can make regulation. Regulation is part of law, because regulation is a subsidiary legislation that derives its validity from a statute. So he usurped it through a decree, not our law, that the sole administrator can make law, and that he, Tinubu, and his cabinet will be the one to authorize the law, usurping the power of the legislature. That is treason. That is trying to govern Nigeria or a part of it in a manner not contemplated by the constitution. Now, Tinubu suspended numerous sections of the constitution in order to make his declaration. No state of emergency authorizes the government to suspend any provision of the constitution. But in declaring the martial law, which Tinubu did for Rivers State, he suspended section 1 of the constitution, section 179, 180, 188, 189, and section 120 and 121, including section 117 and 110, in other words 110 of the constitution. He suspended these several sections of the constitution in order to make that declaration. That cannot be declaration of a state of emergency. what are these constitutions, provisions of the constitution talking? You cannot govern Nigeria outside elected member of the representatives of the people. That is what these sections are saying. And these sections enumerated the methods that you can use to remove a member of the House of Assembly or the governor. 1, by death, by resignation, by removal through impeachment, by permanent incapacity and expiration of term, and for the House of Assembly member by recall. That is the summary of all these sections that I have enumerated. So the president suspended these sections and wanted to rule Rivers State by decree, because he has already usurped the power of the legislature. And that is why I'm saying that what he declared was martial law, was a coup against the people of Rivers State. Rivers State are the ones that elected the governor and the members of the House of Assembly. And even by interpretation act, he said he that appoints is the only person that has the power to remove. So the president did not appoint the governor, he did not appoint the members of the House of Assembly, they were elected. So the president has no right to remove them. And any government in place in a democracy was instituted by laws, and that is why the Supreme Court say any act of governance that is not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. Even the National Assembly that has the right, and I'm talking now about the state of emergency, for you to know the difference from the state of emergency and what Tinubu did. In the state of emergency, section 305 was clear. You declare state of emergency when there is war, or when there is imminent threat of invasion of Nigeria. That has not happened. Or when there is actual breakdown of public order and public safety as to warrant extraordinary measure to correct the situation, or where there is a danger that such a thing will happen, or where there is a natural calamity of such that needs extraordinary measure to correct, or where there is a threat to the collapse of the Federation of Nigeria. This is section 305 subsection 3. Now, none of these things has happened, and the president came on TV to say there is a security report for you. Security reports, Mr. President, is for you. It is not for Nigerians. So anything that Nigerians do not know should not know Nigerians. You that know your security report, the security report has not given you the right to remove elected representatives. So what the state of emergency actually is doing is that the president should empower the democratic forces to be able to overcome the danger, even if it means using extraordinary measure. What is the extraordinary measures? The state of emergency that is talking about that extraordinary measure is that you have the right to restrict the fundamental human rights of Nigerians when you are taking away the extraordinary measure. It does not mean removing elected representatives, and this was stated in section 45 of the Constitution, when they say that the provisions of the human rights cannot invalidate any law made by the National Assembly if that law is intended for the defense, public safety, public morality, public order, or public health of the country. And even that section made it clear that the National Assembly has the power to make such law for the defense, even if it affects the fundamental human rights. And in section 11 subsection 4, the Constitution made it clear that the making of the law by the National Assembly does not include the removal of the governor or the deputy. That is, even if the legislature is not functioning in that state. What does that tell you? That no law gives any right to any elected president to remove the elected representatives of the people. Now let me tell you this catch, because the president is referring to one pipeline or two that was breached during the regime of President Goodluck Jonathan. The whole pipelines in Niger Delta were threatened, most of them breached by the militants that have waged war against the Federal Republic because of the marginalization of the Niger Delta. President Goodluck Jonathan, bless his soul, that was a situation that needed a state of emergency. He did not even declare a state of emergency because he did not believe that there was anything extraordinary in what these people are doing, which the security forces cannot contain. He simply made an order that the security forces should restore order in that region and arrest the culprits and bring them to justice. This was what he did. And the security forces moved in. No governor was affected, no House of Assembly was affected, and it led to the dialogue, which resulted in the amnesty, which brought peace to the region, which we are enjoying today. When a competent president wants to make peace in any part of the country, he goes it by the way that President Goodluck Jonathan, that President Umaru Yar'Adua went about it. You negotiate, you go into dialogue, not going to support your appointee in order to destroy the state because you want to capture the state. That is why it is not a state of emergency that he's doing, because Yar'Adua, faced with the problem in the entire Niger Delta, which breached all the pipelines, which brought war against the Federal Republic, did not even declare a state of emergency. And the president is telling you apprehension, there is tension, not that is anything actual, no evidence. So that is one. Secondly, when Goodluck Jonathan was faced with invasion, insurgency by a terrorist group called Boko Haram that has taken over local governments and 3 states were under threat, Goodluck Jonathan rightly declared a state of emergency and did not remove any governor, did not remove any elected representative of the people. Why? Because he was not declaring martial law, he was declaring state of emergency. And he took out that situation. I remember when Boko Haram, before the election, in 6 weeks, he wiped them out. Why he declared the state of emergency is to let the people know your movement might be curtailed, so don't come and quote for us freedom of movement. You should not come out in so time because stray bullets can catch you. And then if stray bullet catches anybody, you can't go to court and say the person was killed. That is the essence of the state of emergency. Your fundamental human rights could be involved. Now let's go to Obasanjo, because Obasanjo was the only leader that removed some governors during the state of declaring state of emergency, which of course the courts now have ruled illegal. But one thing Obasanjo did, he did not use it as an instrument of power grab. Obasanjo never declared or removed any elected representative in the opposition party. It was only PDP members, his own party, that he removed. And there was another governor that had the same security problem in another party. Obasanjo refused to remove him because he knew that it would be interpreted as power grab. Obasanjo wrote a letter of warning to that governor. When Tinubu was governor, there was security problems in Lagos. Obasanjo restrained himself from declaring state of emergency in Lagos. I still remember it was Dele Alake that came out on TV and told Obasanjo, the security in Nigeria is your duty, not the duty of Tinubu in Lagos. And that if security had failed in Lagos, it is your failure, not the failure of Governor Tinubu. And you cannot declare a state of emergency in Lagos because of security failures, because security is the exclusive reserve of the federal government, because all the instruments and apparatus of the armed forces is commanded by the federal government. The state has no power because they don't have any police. And Dele Alake made it plain to Obasanjo. When I met Dele Alake when we were in APC in one function, I went to him and said, Dele, remember that thing you did during Tinubu's regime? You confronted Obasanjo and told Obasanjo he cannot declare a state of emergency in Lagos. Dele said, yes. We talked about it. I said, Dele, you did the right thing. And I congratulated him. He is there today. He told me that, look, they had to do it. And they did it. And Obasanjo did not declare state of emergency in Lagos. Not because there was no tension. There was even times in Lagos when Alaipo will kill a soldier or wound a soldier without knowing. The soldiers will go and wipe them out. During Tinubu's regime, nobody declared state of emergency. And now in Rivers State, nobody has died as a result of anything. And you came out on TV and say you're declaring a state of emergency. No, it's not a state of emergency. It is a declaration of martial law. It is a coup to forcefully and with the military remove elected representatives so that you would take over the state and administer it with military people. That's a coup. Now, let me come in again, because when they talk about this state of emergency or removing governor, Tinubu is the first president since 1979 that has used the instrument of state of emergency to usurp power from the opposition party till date. That is why it's a power grab. There was nothing in Rivers State that necessitated the declaration of a state of emergency. Let me give you another example, because they are talking about pipeline being breached, this and that. When they organized the local government election in Rivers State, secretariats were burned by people who were against the governor. Somebody was caught with a bomb. He detonated it, he wounded him. They traced him, they knew him, they arrested him. What has happened to him? To date, nothing. People went arsonists who were loyal to the appointees of the president, burnt down the secretariats in open glare. Nobody was arrested. Why? No state of emergency was declared. Why? And then now you have peace. You're saying you are declaring a state of emergency. I was really troubled when the president was mentioning Supreme Court judgment. The Supreme Court judgment said that Appropriation Act must be submitted by the governor. Resubmitted, not submitted, because the governor has submitted it into a legitimate House of Assembly, and they were legitimate until the declaration of the Supreme Court. Now they said he should represent it to the 27 lawmakers, and the law is that no money of the state can be spent except it is appropriated by the House of Assembly, and that the governor will present it for such appropriation, and it will be embedded in an appropriation bill, which will become act, which will become law if passed. That's why I say that Tinubu suspended section 120 and section 121, because he wants to destroy the same Supreme Court judgment which has given a final judgment on the issue that the governor should represent the Appropriation Act. This declaration is against the Supreme Court judgment, and it is now Tinubu that is disobeying the Supreme Court judgment, not the governor of Rivers State. The governor of Rivers State went, he wrote to them first, come, let us discuss about the budget. What a good man. Why is he inviting them? Because the budget that contained only 3 members of the House of Assembly will not be the same as the budget that will contain 27 members. So in his characteristic form, he said, come, let us sit down and discuss the issues that arose from Supreme Court judgment. They refused. They gave him ultimatum. Can you imagine? People who gave ultimatum mean we are waiting for you and you must come and present this within this time. The governor, when they refused to come and see him, went to honor the ultimatum, and yet they locked the gate against him, and yet Tinubu is giving it as an example, and he's calling the governor. Which governor? The governor that said he is going to obey everything about the Supreme Court judgment and has obeyed all, and you're still calling him. That means you have a sinister motive to overthrow this government by force, and that is exactly what he did, deploying the military, because that deployment is against the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is an impeachable offense for a president to move against the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is very clear. No money should be spent, and they even stopped the allocation to that state. So saying that you will unilaterally make a law to overrule the Supreme Court and give the money of Rivers people to a sole administrator who is not even from their state, who is not even elected by them, means that you want to use your power, which is military power, as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. You want to use the armed forces to steal the money of Rivers people and use it and give to your stooges, because there is no law that covers it. Like I said, the Supreme Court is clear. Any act of governance not covered under an enabling law is a nullity. So Tinubu is trying to breach the Supreme Court's judgment. Tinubu is trying to usurp the power of the National Assembly to make law. Tinubu is the executive. So Tinubu now wants to be the legislature, the judiciary, the executive in the issues of Rivers State. If this is not military dictatorship, if this is not a declaration of martial law, tell me what it is. Because rule of law means that government should do everything in accordance with the law. Which law has given Tinubu the rights to appoint a friend of his, or a stooge of his, or a loyalist of his, and overthrow the elected representative of Rivers people and use such people to govern Rivers State? So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and Nigerians must rise against this. The president of South Korea, like I said, was removed and is facing trial for declaring a martial law upon the country. So Tinubu ought to be removed and ought to be facing trial for treason. This is the treason we're talking about, not arresting children who do not know anything about removing a government and saying you want to try them for treason. This is the actual treason, and this is what should happen. Elected people should be very careful what they do, because power is not forever. One day they will account for all the things they are doing. So what happened in Rivers State is a coup, and should be regarded as that. It's not a declaration of state of emergency, it's a declaration of martial law, whereby you remove elected representatives by force of arms, and then you install a leader, which is a sole administrator outside the democratic norms of the society.
The House of Representatives has already approved the President's request for the state of emergency.
In my own opinion, what happened in the House of Representatives is illegal, because anytime the law stipulates the required majority to attain a particular issue, you cannot use a voice vote, because you have to prove that the required majority was attained. Section 305 subsection 6b, if I can remember, made it clear that 2/3 of the members of National Assembly has to approve of any declaration of state of emergency within 2 days. So assuming, without conceding, that it is even state of emergency, which I have told you it is not, and I have quoted the MBA, which is the highest association of lawyers in Nigeria, that said none of the conditions has been obeyed that will warrant the declaration of state of emergency. So assuming, without conceding, the National Assembly must record that they have the necessary quorum, which is 2/3, and everybody should write his name and sign, because this is like akin to the removal of the speaker, which you need 2/3, or the governor. So the signatures would have to be gotten, and it has to be counted and votes taken, and Nigerians will see that 2/3 of the House of Representatives have done it. What I heard, if I heard correctly, was a voice vote, the speaker saying that they have reached the quorum. And then, do you agree? Yes. Do you not agree? How do you know 2/3 from voice? How do you know 2/3 from voice? Assuming I am in this house now and you're outside and I want to confuse people, and I'll say, hey. You would think it's 3 people. Sorry, government business is not done like that. There's nothing like voice vote in any matter that the law requires a certain percentage to be approved, because you have to prove that that percentage or that majority was attained. So I do not believe that, legally speaking, that they have done anything. The law gives them power to approve any resolution through voice vote, and if any one of them is in doubt, then the house has to be divided, but not when The law says 2/3, because if there is a legal matter, you have to present evidence in writing that 2/3 was achieved. So how can you go to court and say you heard the voice of 2/3? Sorry, that's a joke. It ought to be discarded. These people are making Nigerians to be a joke in international community. When America wants to approve anything in the house, you will see people voting electronically. I'm not talking about the one that requires 2/3. I'm talking about every resolution, because the people that sent you to represent them would have to know how you're representing them, and each vote they would have to know how you voted to know whether you're representing them well. How can you distinguish and separate people the way they voted when you say voice vote? No, that is a way to entrench corruption, to entrench irresponsibility in the running of the affairs of the legislature, because I'm entitled to know how my representative that I voted in, how he voted on any issue in the floor, to know whether I will support him again coming to 2027 or in any other election. Telling me that you went through a voice vote on such a matter like this is a joke. And now, like I've always told us, that the legislature has not done what they are supposed to do. The power in a democracy does not lie in the executive, it lies in the legislature. So if things are going bad, and I've written it in my column, blame the legislature, because the executive does not have any power to spend anything except the legislature approves. Now in this state of emergency, the executive has no power to declare it except the legislature approves. So when democracy is going bad, please, the first point of call you blame is the legislature, not the executive. And until we start holding them responsible, our democracy will continue to degenerate. That's why Montesquieu made it clear that whenever the legislature is corrupt and becomes compromised and work with the executive in a compromised form, then democracy will come to an end. It's very unfortunate. Well, let's see what the Senate will do. I will be shocked and surprised if 73 members of the Senate will vote that elected members of subnational that belong to the opposition party, that they should be removed on the whims and caprices of a president who does not respect the constitution, does not respect the law, because a lot of them are former governors. They should understand what they are doing, because if this president is set, what it means is that any president can use the instrumentality of the so-called state of emergency and take over all the states which he did not win during election. Any state that he feels might hinder his re-election, he will just use that method and go and take it. So the issue here is we are trying to establish democracy, we're trying to sustain democracy. Democracy will be unsustainable when a single man will come and decide to chase away elected people. Aristotle said it is a bad thing for any human being with all the disorders and affections of the human mind to become the sovereign authority which ought to be reserved for the law itself. We should be governed by law in this country, and the privilege to remove anybody should belong to the law, not to any one human being with all the affections and disorders of the human mind. Human mind, that's why they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Aristotle said, and I repeat, it is a bad thing for any human being with all the disorders and affections of the human mind to be the sovereign authority which ought to be reserved for the law itself. Tinubu is not the sovereign authority in Nigeria. Sovereignty belongs to the people, and every government derives its power and authority from the people. And the people have spoken through the constitution and through the laws that no president should remove elected representative of the people, and it should be so. So what Tinubu did is treasonable. That is a declaration of martial law and should be seen as such. So I will be shocked and surprised if the Senate, by any means say that they are supporting this illegality and this treason against the people of Rivers State. I heard an allegation, what Nigerians would say allegedly, that thousands of dollars were given before some of the people did what they did. Well, I remember that Bajabi Amila, when he was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, I remember Chukwu Merije, they said when they wanted third term, that money was given to influence people. So if anything happens, I would have the right to assume and to presume that certain corruption took place, as in my own opinion, because I would not see how an elected member will come and vote that another elected member will be removed by a president and an unelected person used to replace the person, and then the person will govern without democratic structures through decrees. Obviously it will be mind-boggling. So I expect the Senate as a matured house to take a different approach. But I'm telling you that if I hear anything, because if you had told me that the house will even do what they did, of course it's illegal in my own opinion, but that they will even do it is even crazy to me. So let's wait and see. The implication is that we don't have democracy anymore, because if you can remove elected representatives of the people, why would you call them to come and vote next time? If there is an invasion against Nigeria, will Tinubu agree that the military will come and sack him and give reason that it is because of the invasion, and because of the invasion there is a need for a state of emergency, and when there is a state of emergency the president has to go, and then they rule by decree? Because that's exactly what the president did. And you know the difference. If there is an invasion against Nigeria, the law gives power to declare state of emergency. There is no invasion of any part of Nigeria. There is no threat of war. I'm even hearing that Cameroonians are harassing Nigerians in the mangrove. Maybe Tinubu should consider declaring a state of emergency and giving up his seat and inviting another military man to come and take over, because Cameroon is invading Nigeria. Because what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So there's no room for what Tinubu did. As a matter of fact, in my own opinion, it's treasonable. So if it happens, we are no longer in a democracy. We are now in a full-blown dictatorship.
All right. Nigeria. Anyway, drop your comment on the comment section. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe, all right? I'll see you in my next video. Thank you. God bless you.